This episode of Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. Martini Coffee Roasters is not a martini-flavored coffee. In fact, it is a family-owned and operated company run by the Martini family. And while I'm sure they enjoy a good cocktail, they are all about that high-quality, smooth, flavorful coffee. Unlike many other roasters, Martini Coffee Roasters roast manually using a traditional method of roasting, most relying on sight and sound to ensure the best results, okay? This is quality, people. This is artisanal. This is handmade. This is what you're wanting. And not only that, but they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. So please support small businesses and check out Martini Coffee Roasters at martinicoffee.com. Once again, check out Martini Coffee Roasters at martinicoffee.com.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, I am Maureen Bogey.
And I'm Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast.
Yeah.
Whoa. Thank you
good.
guys for joining us today for a special throbbing episode that we can't wait to jump into.
Oh, yeah.
Big time. Feel free to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. On Facebook, we also have a subgroup called Citizens of the Milky Way, where we just have a little bit more of an interactive, smaller group, but anyone is welcome. Feel free to mosey on over to that, and we will accept any Creep Street fan, any Creep Street's homie.
That's right.
If one episode a week is not enough for you,
That's right.
please feel free to head on over to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast. And on there are different tier levels to scratch that itch for you and get you a little bit of extra Creep Street content.
That is right.
Speaking of Patreon, Dylan, will you please read off our Patreon donors at our top tier?
Oh, this never gets old. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, and the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli. Yes. If you want more, baby, if you just need more, go to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was invigorating. And wow, last week we did an episode that was a little bit different for us.
Absolutely.
It was a little bit kind of we were switching it up a little bit.
That's right.
That is great. But this week, we knew we had to go full throttle Creep Street.
Amen.
Down our paranormal zone, our sweet spot.
This is one that's been requested so many times that usually we give shout out, but so many people have requested it. We're just going to say thank you for requesting it. There's just been a lot.
So many people. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. We're so happy to be doing this episode.
Absolutely. It's about damn time.
Woo.
Citizens of the Milky Way, today we are talking about Annabelle the Haunted Doll. Really quick, let me just give you my sources.
Okay.
First was a book called The Demonologist, The Extraordinary Career of Ed and Lorraine Warren by Gerald Brittle. Now there was an article called Annabelle, The True Story of a Demonic Doll at Mysterious Universe, and also Inside the Real Annabelle Doll's True Story of Terror by Katie Serena et al. That's interesting.
I am so excited for today.
Oh, yes.
I've been looking forward to this.
A lot of people have been. This is a big one, gang.
Because I'm excited to do a little bit of a deeper dive into Annabelle because, of course, so many people are somewhat aware of Annabelle through the Conjuring universe,
Absolutely.
of course. But it's good to know really where it came from, because we love the Conjuring universe.
Absolutely.
No shade. But it's not exactly the same as
Right.
Annabelle's actual origin story.
Now, the Annabelle movie is nothing like the true story, which is fine. But the beginning of the first Conjuring movie,
Yes.
there's like that scene where they're giving a speech at like a university. They're telling the Annabelle story. That story they open the first Conjuring with is actually much more like the true story we're going to talk about today.
I think there are lines in that scene in The Conjuring that are, word for word from the demonologist,
From their
the book.
from their recorded rights.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
it is, that one really, that part is very, very close, I think.
Well, as we know, we are talking about another one of Ed and Lorraine Warren's biggest cases today. Now, the true story, just so you know, even though it's different, it's just as terrifying as the movie. First, let's talk about the actual doll itself.
Please.
So the Annabelle you see in the film is obviously a doll that was designed, for the film franchise.
Right.
The real Annabelle doll was actually just a Raggedy Ann doll.
Yes.
The Raggedy Ann doll is a character that's been around for over 100 years. I think it said the first doll was made in 1915, and then in 1918 there was like books and stuff that came out.
Oh, yeah.
Since then it's been kind of this iconic.
I had a couple Raggedy Ann dolls growing up. They're great. Classic.
Yeah, it's this thing that's always been around. People collect them and whatnot. So it was actually kind of a run-of-the-mill, mass-produced doll.
Well, it's funny too, because the fact that it's a Raggedy Ann doll can be like, oh, that's not scary at all.
Right.
That's so normal. But I think that actually makes more sense, and I think long run makes it scarier than in the Annabelle that's used in the movies, because it's just like, it is blatantly so scary looking.
Right,
that
right.
you're like, I'm not shocked at all that this
Exactly.
negative activity is connected to the doll.
So our story begins in the year 1970 in a quiet, unassuming antique shop. And inside, there was a woman. She was looking around for a gift for her daughter. Her daughter, Donna, was turning 28 years old that day. And her daughter was also just about to graduate from nursing school. So her mother was brimming with pride. Just wanted to find something cute, something sweet. And that's when she found it. A child-size antique Raggedy Ann doll. She bought it right away. And Donna herself, her daughter, was not actually like a doll collector, but she loved it nonetheless.
Wow.
And Donna actually shared an apartment with a roommate named Angie, who was also a fellow nursing student. Very close and all that stuff, and they were great pals. And, they loved the doll. They kind of used it as like a little decorative piece. They would kind of place the doll either like on the living room couch, or Donna would leave it on her bed after she made it every morning. Kind of like you would with most dolls,
Or like a teddy bear, or, just as, a cute little thing.
Absolutely. Nothing to worry about.
So far, it's just, what's wrong with this,
You're absolutely
At here, we're
right.
just living life. We're doing pretty damn well, if I do say so myself.
So far, so good. It was all very subtle as it got started. Funny things would happen. Like Donna and Angie would be going out for their day, coming and going, and they would just notice sometimes that it seemed as if the doll had moved or adjusted its position ever so slightly. But things were so subtle you could easily dismiss it, because this is like a rag doll. If you slam a door loud, you bump the couch, it could move, right?
Right.
So it wasn't even a thing you would really notice.
And also, it's like one of those things, you don't really take stock of what the doll looks like before you leave for the day.
Exactly.
So when you come back, you're like, I don't think it was like that, but I actually don't totally remember.
Exactly.
It's like those little things.
So like maybe they'd leave and its legs were crossed, and when they got home they weren't. Things like that. Let's remember this thing didn't have articulated joints either.
It's not like an action figure or
Right.
an American Girl doll or something.
Exactly. So it's not unreasonable to think that, hey, if you bump into the couch, whatever, you could move it. But the changes were always just enough to get your attention. Just enough.
I hate that. That's so scary. It's so intelligent.
Yeah, it was always just enough. And we'll get into why. Donna and Angie never let it concern them until it reached a point that they couldn't really ignore anymore. One day, both Donna and Angie returned home together, and as they walked in the door, they immediately stopped in their tracks. The doll was somehow in the dining room. It was standing upright, leaning against one of the dining room chairs. It was almost as if the doll was moving around, and then the second they opened the door, it almost like Toy Story. How like the dolls will,
God.
they'll be like, Andy's coming, and they'll fall on the flop on the ground, like that.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. Almost like it was in the middle of doing something, and then it paused when they opened the door.
It just, halted immediately, whatever it was doing. Oh, that's so weird. Where was it going? What is it doing?
This was the first time Donna and Angie admitted out loud to each other that there was something weird about the doll.
Yeah.
They had each kind of noticed those little things separately, but never mentioned it to each other just because, But this was the first time they out loud said, hey, there's something weird.
Enough is enough. Let's talk about it.
Now, once they acknowledged it, things began to pick up a little bit. Donna would leave the apartment, and when she did, she'd leave the doll on her bed, only to come home, find it resting on the living room couch with its arms and legs crossed.
No.
Almost like it's saying hey, like a little mischief. Maybe.
Yeah, that I could not go on. I could not move forward.
Sometimes Donna would leave the doll on the living room couch only to come home and find that it was now in her bedroom with the door shut.
Oh, you guys.
Now, Ed and Lorraine Warren, they won't be entering into the story till later on, but just to give you a perspective, here is an excerpt of an interview Donna later did with the Warrens.
I put it on my bed each morning after the bed was made. The arms would be off to its sides and the legs would be straight out, just like it's sitting there now. But when we'd come home at night, the arms and legs would be positioned in different gestures. For instance, its legs would be crossed at the ankles or its arms would be folded in its lap. After a week or so, this made us suspicious. So to test it, I purposely crossed its arms and legs in the morning to see if it really was moving. And sure enough, every night when we'd come home, the arms and legs would be uncrossed, and the thing would be sitting there in any of a dozen different postures.
And here is an excerpt of what Angie told the Warrens about the doll.
The doll also changed rooms by itself. We came home one night and the Annabelle doll was sitting in a chair by the front door. It was kneeling. The funny thing about it is when we tried to make the doll kneel, it would just fall over. It couldn't kneel. Other times we'd find it sitting on the sofa, although when we left the apartment in the morning, it'd be in Donna's room with the door closed.
Boy, oh boy.
That is so freaky.
Yeah.
Also, if you do get a chance to listen to the demonologist on Audible,
yes,
this section is incredible for many reasons, but especially for the way the man narrates these women's voices.
Yeah. He puts
it's
on this.
Both really great and kind of cringy.
So these two women are now officially frightened.
I mean, this is very scary. The fact that it's able to open and close doors and can be in a position that it has never been able to physically do before. Oh, that's so weird.
They aren't really sure what to do because they aren't even really sure what it is they're actually dealing with.
Right.
You see, having a ghost would be one thing, but this is a haunted doll. So they decided to confide in their friend Lou. He was a very close friend to both of them. The sources seem to indicate that Donna and Angie were almost afraid of telling people about it because they were afraid people would think they were crazy.
Right.
What's funny is Lou, right away, the moment he sees the doll, just knows there's something evil about it. He can just sense it right away.
Interesting.
And apparently he was not the type of person to be prone to that sort of thing.
Right.
In fact, even at this point, apparently Donna and Angie were not even yet ready to buy into the whole paranormal thing. And here's a good point. At first, they were afraid that someone had gotten a key to their apartment and was moving the doll around. I was like, oh, that's actually very smart.
I was thinking about that too. That would also be so horrifying. Yeah. Someone's breaking into your apartment and is either trying to make you think there's something paranormal in the house, or they're just trying to send this weird message to you that they're watching and that they can invade your space.
Right. It's
that's
horrifying.
So scary. Oh God.
And then that is when the notes started.
Oh God.
Both Donna and Angie began to find little strips of parchment paper around the apartment. Now, here's where things sort of differ from the movie a bit. I think in the movie, one of the things the doll writes is "miss me." What the doll wrote in the real story is different, but also freaky.
Yeah.
But very scary in a different way. The notes would say things like, "help us," or "help Lou."
Oh.
Donna was quoted saying this.
It would leave us little notes and messages. The handwriting looked to be that of a child. Lou wasn't in any kind of jeopardy at the time. And who us was, we didn't know. Still, the thing that was weird was that the notes would be written in pencil, but when we tried to find one, there was not one pencil in the apartment. And the paper it wrote on was parchment. I tore the apartment apart looking for parchment paper, but again, neither of us had any such thing.
So they didn't even have parchment paper.
That's so weird. They didn't have a pencil and they did not have parchment paper. But it's
weird.
Found in their house.
That's even, I mean, obviously, let alone a note was left for them. But like the fact that it was on materials they didn't even have.
So that's scary because either that makes you think, okay, someone is bringing this in.
Absolutely.
Or it's like, is this some paranormal entity that can like, what's the word I'm looking for? That it can just make something appear.
Right, like
that
manifest something.
That can manifest something or can conjure that. I don't know. Oh my God, that
Horrifying.
is so scary.
So right away, Lou is convinced that the doll is writing these notes. And funny enough, as I said, Donna and Angie weren't quite ready to believe in that. Like I said, they were more terrified. It was a living intruder.
Right,
which,
right.
You know, like we said, very smart to consider. So they started to sort of rig up the room in ways that would indicate if someone had been there. So like they would mark the windows before leaving. So they would be able to tell if they had moved. Mm-hmm. Likewise, they would position carpets and rugs against doors so they would be able to tell if someone had entered, things like that. Well,
right.
Of course, they'd come home, the doll had moved again, but there was nothing to indicate,
oh God,
there was an intruder.
Oh, that's so... Oh my God, that freaks me out.
Well, now Donna and Angie were believers.
Oh yeah.
But they were not entirely freaked out yet because so far the doll's actions seemed innocent.
Right, and you probably seeing the help us thing.
Yeah.
You think like, oh, maybe they actually just need something. They need help.
In fact, that Christmas, they think they may have even been given a little gift from the doll. On their stereo, they found a little chocolate boot that no one had bought.
Oh.
So they just assumed that it was probably a gift from the doll.
But how did the doll do that? Wow, that is freaky.
Now, the first time something happened that kind of unsettled them really was when they watched a statue in their living room lift up off the ground and move through the air before finally falling to the ground. And there was something about this that felt like it wasn't innocent.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
So
I mean, it is destructive.
Absolutely.
It sounds a little bit like a poltergeist, possibly.
Right.
But if they're getting like a super negative feeling, that, yeah, I don't know.
Now, things are starting to get a little bit more rowdy. One day, Donna and Angie come home, and the first thing they notice is that the doll, as always, had moved from where they left it in the living room back to Donna's room on the bed. They shrugged it off because they'd seen this a million times.
Right.
But there was something different. When Donna entered her room this time to find the doll there, it just says something felt different.
Oh my God.
Nothing Donna could put her finger on, but for whatever reason, something was telling her that this doll was not good. The doll was evil, and Angie suddenly knew it too. It says the two of them just looked at the doll, and later they would say,
The Annabelle doll was sitting on Donna's bed as was usual. When we came home one night, there was blood on the back of its hand, and there was 3 drops of blood on its chest. God, that really scared us.
clearly they were dealing with something different.
Wow. Blood?
Drops of blood. Where would it even have come from?
Yeah.
Clearly it was time to reach out for help. Actually, the first person that Donna and Angie reached out to was actually a medium. Now, they had had this doll for about 4 to 6 weeks, it says, and they felt it was time to, make an effort.
So all of that had happened just within, a month or two?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so that's fast.
They contact a medium who comes over, and immediately she goes into a trance-like state and begins to make contact with the spirit. And they were surprised by what the medium told them. She said that the doll was being inhabited by the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins, who lived in the area many years before then. And in an interview later, Donna explained what exactly this medium had told them.
We learned that a little girl died on this property. She was 7 years old and her name was Annabelle Higgins. The Annabelle spirit said she played in the fields long ago before these apartments were built. They were happy times for her, she told us. Because everyone around here was grown up and only concerned with their jobs, there was no one she could relate to except us. Annabelle felt like we would be able to understand her. That's why she began moving the rag doll. All Annabelle wanted was to be loved, and so she asked if she could stay with us and move into the doll. What could we do? So we said yes.
Whoops.
You could say no, But to be fair, she doesn't know anything about the paranormal world. She thinks like, okay, maybe we just got a weird vibe off of this thing, and if this is the spirit of a little girl and we can help her, they want to help.
Well, and think about it, they're nursing students, they're probably very empathetic people.
Totally.
Like anyone, you would have a natural when you were told a story like that, you know.
And especially too, all she was really doing was just like moving the doll around. So you're they're probably like, I mean, sure, it's not really, doesn't really matter. It's the same as what's going on now. And that probably makes them feel better too, because they're like, oh, this thing is harmless. It's just literally a 7-year-old girl that we're just kind of like babysitting.
Right. Well, now the real terror was about to begin. So they finally had a name associated with the spirit, Annabelle. So going forward, they were just referred to the doll as Annabelle.
Right.
Now, while Donna and Angie were somewhat at ease now, Lou was not.
Lou is kind of MVP of this situation. He knew from the start.
Yeah. He still maintained that there was something wicked about this doll. He pleaded with Donna to get rid of it, and she didn't, of course. It was a gift from her mother, which is, understandable.
Right. But also it's like, I think her mom would understand. It's like, if all of this is going on, maybe it's the thought that counts.
Here's the thing. Annabelle did not take well to Lou trying to intervene. That night, when Lou returned back to his house, he was not alone. Lou had recently been having bizarre, reoccurring bad dreams every night. But this time was different. In the middle of the night, Lou suddenly woke up, but felt like he couldn't move. We've heard this before.
Oh my God.
Sleep paralysis. He sensed there was someone in the room that he couldn't see.
A shadow person?
He couldn't see anyone, but he just sensed there was someone there.
Oh God.
And that's when he saw her. There, on his bed by his feet, was Annabelle.
Oh my God.
Here's how Lou described this moment to the Warrens.
While I was lying there, I saw myself wake up. Something seemed wrong to me. I looked around the room, but nothing was out of place. But then when I looked down toward my feet, I saw the rag doll, Annabelle. It was slowly gliding up my body. It moved over my chest and stopped. Then it put its arms out. One arm touched one side of my neck. The other touched the other side like it was making an electrical connection. And then I saw myself being strangled. I might as well have been pushing on a wall because it wouldn't move. It literally was strangling me to death. I couldn't help myself no matter how hard I tried.
Lou was gasping for air and then blacked out. And that's when he woke up again. Seemingly, this was just a very vivid bad dream.
Wow.
But he knew this was no dream. They had to get rid of that damn doll.
That's intense.
Very intense.
Oh, God.
Horrifying. How wild that it's kind of like the Shadow Person Hat Man, except, insert doll.
That kind of lends itself to the idea maybe that when we are asleep or something, maybe we are able to be more privy to these paranormal events. Our brain waves are more compatible with understanding these things. I don't know.
And perhaps this thing just obviously in his dream, like say it was Hat Man, it took the form of this doll that he knew he was afraid of and would elicit that fear in him to sort of get that hit from that fear bong. You know what I'm saying?
The fear bongs, yeah. Or maybe it's not Hat Man at all. Maybe it's just Annabelle, but it's just Annabelle can also work in these same mysterious ways.
That's right.
And shows that maybe this is all kind of connected, which is what we say all the time.
That's right. Well, it was pretty obvious to Lou that this doll was essentially telling him to mind his own fucking business.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Raggedy Ann. It's strangling you, for Christ's sakes. That's intense.
Yeah. The next night, Lou went back to Donna and Angie's, and him and Angie were actually in the living room. They were going over a bunch of maps. They were planning out a road trip.
Oh, fun.
So it was about 11 p.m. when all of a sudden, both Lou and Angie heard a sort of shuffling sound coming from Donna's room. Angie was afraid that someone had broken in, but Lou had other ideas.
Oh, God.
Lou slowly made his way towards Donna's bedroom door, and he opened it and entered the room. Annabelle was just laying in a corner of the room, almost as if the doll had just kind of been casually tossed over there. So Lou slowly starts to cross the room towards the doll when he stops dead in his tracks. There was something tingling on the back of his neck. From behind him, not where the doll was, because the doll's in front of him.
Right.
From behind him, it felt like he could feel eyes gazing at him.
My stomach just flipped.
And what happened next was something so horrible that Lou himself couldn't even talk to the Warrens about it. Angie had to relay the story to them, and this is what she said.
He won't talk about that part. When Lou turned around, there wasn't anybody there, but he suddenly yelled and grabbed for his chest. He was doubled over, cut and bleeding when I got to him. Blood was all over his shirt. Lou was shaking and scared, and we went back out into the living room. We then opened his shirt, and there on his chest was what looked to be a sort of claw mark.
On Lou's chest were 7 clear slices, 4 horizontal, 3 vertical.
Wow.
Lou would say that the scratches burned horribly and even seemed to give off heat.
Oh my God.
Strangely enough, the next day the scratches were nearly gone.
Yes.
And within 48 hours would be gone entirely.
Yeah, you hear about that a lot with these demonic scratches.
Yeah.
Is that they are so intense and painful.
Yeah.
But they heal very quickly, which makes it hard to prove to someone because by the time you are able to show someone the scratch in person, it has healed.
Well, it was clear now this was no 7-year-old girl they were dealing with.
Oh,
something
my God.
far, far worse. So the first thing they did was actually reach out to an Episcopalian priest named Father Hegan. He met with the 3 folks at the apartment and they explained to him their ordeal. And Father Hegan, he believed them, but he knew he was not qualified for something like this, so he referred them to one of his superiors, a Father Cook. And it was Father Cook who then put them in contact with Ed and Lorraine Warren.
There we go.
So the Warrens come to the apartment right away, and the 3 of them, Lou, Angie, Donna, they fill them in on everything that has happened.
There we go.
And that's when Ed dropped a bombshell on him.
To begin with, there is no Annabelle. There never was. You were duped. However, we are dealing with a spirit here. The teleportation of the doll while you were out of the apartment, the appearance of the notes written on parchment, the manifestation of 3 symbolic drops of blood, plus the gestures the doll made were all meaningful. They tell me there was intent, which means there was an intelligence behind the activity. But ghosts, human spirits, plain and simply can't bring on phenomenon of this nature and intensity. They don't have the power. What's happened is that something inhuman has taken over here. Demonic. Ordinarily, people aren't bothered by inhuman demonic spirits unless they do something to bring the force into their lives. Your first mistake was to give the doll recognition. That is the reason why the spirit moved into the doll, to draw attention to itself. Once it had your attention, it exploited you. It simply brought you fear and even injury. Inhuman spirits enjoy inflicting pain. It's negative. Your next mistake was calling in the medium. The demonic has to somehow get your permission to interfere in your life. Unfortunately, through your own free will, you gave it that permission. Spirits don't possess things. Spirits possess people. Instead, the spirit simply moved the doll around and gave it the illusion of being alive. Now, what happened to Lou earlier this week was bound to occur sooner or later. In fact, you all were in jeopardy of coming under possession by this spirit. This is what the thing is really after. But Lou didn't believe the charade, so he was an ongoing threat to the entity. There was bound to be a showdown. Had the spirit been given another week or 2, you might have been killed.
Wow, okay, so here we have the confirmation that this is demonic.
He's saying that, okay, so essentially, even though they were being empathetic and even though they were being deceived, it needed permission, even if it was bullshit permission, even if though it took the form of the, it pretended to be this, That's why you always hear when you mess with Ouija boards, never trust who you're fucking talking to.
Right, exactly.
Never fucking trust who you're talking to.
You can't know for sure who you're talking to.
Well, it was official. The doll was just a decoy. The entity wanted them. The only thing next to do was conduct an exorcism. So the Warrens contacted the priest who had initially contacted them, Father Cook, but he was reluctant to go along with it. Finally, the Warrens convinced him how bad the situation was, so he finally agreed. So Father Cook went to the apartment. He conducted the ritual as well as a blessing for the home and the people living there. Now, you think this would have caused a huge paranormal incident.
Right.
The exorcism, however, went over quietly, but something still felt weird. It definitely helped, but it didn't seem like the entity was entirely gone. The house was protected, and so were Donna, Angie, and Lou, but there was still something about that damn doll.
Interesting.
So the Warrens asked if they could take the doll, and Donna happily agreed to it.
Right. Oh, yeah, get that thing out of there.
Father Cook was also feeling uneasy as well, and he told the Warrens that when they drove home, not to drive on the interstate where there'd be a lot of traffic. So they thought that was probably a good idea too, so they took the back roads home. And sure enough, on the drive home, every time they would come to a sharp turn in the road, the car would stall, which would cut out the brakes and power steering.
Oh, God.
They had numerous close calls until finally Ed pulled the car over, got out his holy water, and splashed the doll in the sign of a cross with the holy water, saying a prayer. This actually allowed them to make it home without any more incident.
This is why you need to keep holy water in your car.
I guess so. First place they actually put the doll was in a chair that was in Ed's office. And over the next few days, it levitated several times.
Oh, that levitation.
It's
there's
weird.
something about it that really freaks me out because it's such it's showing off.
Yeah.
You know, it's just being like, look, I can do this. And
Exactly.
it's like, why? I think I don't know. It freaks me out.
They watched as it levitated, and then finally it just fell lifeless on the floor, and it stayed there for a few weeks. It would do this also to Donna and them. This thing played the long game.
Right, yeah, a little bit of a drama queen here.
Of course, before long, it would start up again, doing kind of what it did at the other place. It would appear in different rooms of the house, stuff like that. Well, Ed and Lorraine Warren had seen enough, so they called in a Catholic priest who was an exorcist by the name of Father Jason Bradford. I guess he was a younger priest. And apparently Father Bradford was not amused by this whole haunted doll story. He kind of did it begrudgingly. He thought it was all bullcrap, probably thought Ed and Lorraine Warren were just trying to, make headlines, something like that.
Yes.
Ed and Lorraine Warren were afraid of the priest's dismissive attitude. Apparently he even picked it up and was like, you can't hurt anyone, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. They
don't want to do that.
Ed and Lorraine, they don't mess with that. They are not going to stand for that.
And Lorraine Warren told Father Bradford, drive safely. The second you get home, call me to let me know you got home safe. Well, the call didn't come in until later that evening. It was Father Bradford. He sounded shaken, and he told them that on his way home that night, his brakes gave out just as he was coming to a busy intersection. His car was pretty much demolished. Him and the other people involved in the accident barely escaped alive. So the Warrens were like, okay, they took the doll and they had a specially made sealed case for it.
Oh my God.
They, had it blessed and everything. And then on the outside, it's kind of a famous photo. You see the words that say, warning, positively do not open. Well, for years, the doll has been a part of the Warrens Occult Museum. Even though they've passed now, they still, Now, the doll has apparently never let up in its activity. One of the most well-known incidents occurred when a young couple visited the museum, and Ed Warren was showing them around, and apparently this young man began to mock the doll.
Oh, come on.
Ed, asked him to stop, but he only continued. Finally, Ed just had to escort the couple out of the museum.
Why?
They just sounded like assholes.
It's like, why are you even here?
Exactly. Later, it was found out that right after that young couple left the museum, they were on a motorcycle.
Oh,
They lost control of the motorcycle they were on, went off the road and collided with a tree. The man was killed instantly, and the woman lived but was in the hospital for about a year.
Oh my God.
And one of the other sources talked about that there's sometimes a black cat would appear with this doll near the doll, and then would sometimes only parts of the cat would appear, it's just its head and stuff like that.
That's so weird. Why is that?
Apparently, one time they had Lorraine had a decorative boar's tooth, not in the museum part, but in their main house. They had guests over, a few of the clergy and just friends, and apparently there was a loud pop, and this boar's tooth exploded, and they had a picture of it that moment, and it looks like there's two eyes looking right at the priest who is standing by the
Wow.
freaky stuff like that.
Oh, that's so... Oh, God.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the story of Annabelle the Haunted Doll.
What the H-E double hockey sticks.
I know.
What a crazy story.
I know, right?
That is so freaky. And there are other haunted dolls
Yes.
that we will have to do episodes on as well.
Yes,
But this
there's
one
ma-
is,
Right.
This is so scary.
There's many other haunted doll stories, and we'll do an episode that's just, haunted dolls. But obviously, Annabelle was big enough; she needed her own.
Oh, she needed
her own story.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's many other stories of haunted dolls. You can find them online. Freaky stuff.
Yeah, and if you have any other suggestions for a specific haunted doll, let us know. But wow, Dylan, thank you so much for doing all of that great, thorough research. I really appreciate it.
Of course, citizens of the Milky Way, this has been Annabelle the Doll. My name is Dylan Hackworth,
I'm Maureen Bogey.
and this is Creep Street. Good night and goodbye.